Part 39. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, Past and Present. Chapter 381. Chapter 381 Don't do anything. Wang An still believed what Xiao Jin said. He watched Xiao Jin leave with an expectant look on his face. Before leaving, Xiao Jin specially said a few words to the jailer in front of King An, asking the jailer to treat King An well, but King An was deeply moved. After all, Xiao Jin was the only brother who came to visit him these days. Out of the prison, not far away, Chen Cheng came over, looked at each other and quickly separated from Xiao Jin. His Royal Highness King Yu. Chen Cheng saluted Xiao Jin as usual. Xiao Jin looked pale and said, "Mr. Chen." The two of them said hello and left. One walked out and the other approached the prison. Prince An's mansion is now surrounded by the imperial army. The concubines can't run away, so they all gathered in Princess Anne's yard. Princess Anne usually doesn't care about anything. She either goes back to her parents' house or stays in her own yard. Ordinary concubines cannot see her. But now that King An has been arrested, the only person in charge of matters in Prince Anne's palace is Princess Anne. Furthermore, only Princess Anne's identity can play a role in King Anne's matter. "Princess, do you want to think of a solution? Something happened to the prince, can we still survive?" When the imperial guards rushed in to arrest people, they saw a lot of concubines. Maybe they didn't recognize them at the time, but after listening to the conversation and calming down and thinking about it, they knew they were imperial guards. If the imperial army can be dispatched to arrest people, the crime committed by King An will definitely be not small. These concubines were so scared that if something happened to them, none of them would be able to escape. Princess Anne looked at the concubine who was kneeling on the ground and felt a little pain in her head. She only knew that King An had brought in many concubines, but now she realized that they were all gone. There was a lot of crying around her, which was noisy and gave people a headache. "Okay, everyone, shut up." Princess Anne couldn't bear it anymore and slammed the table. Hearing the sound, the concubines were startled, their shoulders shrank, and they became quieter, but they could still faintly hear the whimpering. The imperial edict has not yet been issued, and we don't know what will happen to the prince. What you have to do now is not to cause any more trouble to the prince's palace. Now, all go back to your own courtyard. Princess, concubine. Princess. The concubines started chattering again. "If you want to stay, that's fine. I'll go out right now and have someone take you to the Tianlao to see the prince. How about that?" As soon as these words were spoken, the concubines did not dare to hesitate any more and stood up and left one after another. He moved extremely quickly, fearing that someone would really take him to the prison. The room was finally empty. Personal maid Magpie walked up to Princess Anne and said, "Princess, what are you going to do? Let's go back." Princess Anne's eyes darkened. Although she and Prince An were not actually husband and wife, they were known as husband and wife. If something happened to Prince An, it would not be easy for her, let alone her natal family. Magpie nodded respectfully, "I'll go get ready right now." Qin Mansion. The carriage slowly stopped. Princess Anne supported the magpie and got down from the carriage. Not far away, a familiar figure came. "Big brother!" Princess Anne shouted. The other party had seen her a long time ago and was not surprised when she heard her voice. Qin Xiaobang stepped forward with a very calm tone. "Why are you back?" "King An. Let's talk after you come in." Qin Xiaobang interrupted Princess Anne and motioned for her to follow him into the mansion. "How are you doing, madam?" Princess Anne pursed her lips and asked aloud. She is a concubine. A few years ago, during the emperor's draft, the Qin family asked her to join the palace to assist Qin Gaifei. But during the draft, Emperor Jianwen not only failed to select her, but also granted her a marriage to Prince An as his concubine. Even if she doesn't want to, no one can disobey the emperor's orders. What's more, this matter is a good thing for the Qin family, so no one in the Qin family will refuse. 2 months ago, concubine Qin was ordered by Emperor Jianwen to examine herself in the palace. After hearing the news, the eldest lady fell ill immediately. It was not until recently that the eldest lady went to the palace to visit concubine Qin and her health improved a lot. Qin Xiaobang said, "She is in good health, you don't have to worry." Entering the Qin mansion, Qin Xiaobang took Princess An to the main hall and sat down. "Don't worry about King An's affairs." "What's the meaning?" Princess An was stunned for a moment and asked quickly. Qin Xiaobang had many brothers and sisters. If this one hadn't married Prince An, he might not have remembered them clearly. Hence, he was somewhat patient with Princess An. "Eat and drink as you should, just don't do unnecessary things." However, his patience only lasted a few words. After Qin Xiaobang finished speaking, he stood up and left without giving Princess An a chance to ask. Looking at Qin Xiaobang's leaving figure, Princess An pondered his words several times in her mind, but still couldn't figure out the situation. How will King An's matter be handled? Princess An frowned and stood up. Instead of leaving in a hurry, she looked at the housekeeper beside her. "Can I go see the eldest lady?" If Princess An has nothing to do, she should go back early. The butler returned with his head lowered. The meaning of the sentence is obvious, so that she does not have to see the eldest lady. Princess An understood the meaning. "I understand. Magpie, let's go back." "Yes, Princess." Magpie stepped forward and supported Princess An, and the master and servant left the Qin mansion. After returning to the palace, Princess An sent a message to all the courtyards, asking them to stay peacefully in the courtyards and not to do anything more. Although Qin Xiaobang's words were simple and without much explanation, Princess An still believed him. Some concubines who did not listen to the advice even came to make trouble, and were punished by Princess An as a warning to others. Prince An's mansion became quiet. For several days, it was still calm. Sun Mansion. Lao Zhang gave Xiang Lingling acupuncture for the second time. The acupuncture was finished, but Xiang Lingling did not speak. The black cloth over her eyes moved, as if it was moving along with her eyelids. "Seems to be confirming something. I seem to really be able to see." After a long time, Xiang Lingling tentatively spoke. Even though her words were firm, her tone was hesitant. She was worried that it would be another mistake. As before, Mr. Zhang put the lit candle in front of Xiang Lingling. Xiang Lingling stepped back uneasily. This time her reaction to the candle was a little different from last time. Last time, it was because she felt the heat from the candle, but this time, it was because she could really see the light. The light of the candle was too close and was a bit dazzling, which was why she reacted like this. Lao Zhang nodded slightly. "It seems to be indeed effective. According to what I said before, 3 more times should be able to remove the blood congestion in Miss Xiang's brain." Xiang Lingling couldn't help but smile. "Mr. Zhang, is it true?" "Great. I can see it right away." There was a bit of bitterness in that smile. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, Past and Present. Chapter 382. Chapter 382 Mr. Zhang leaves. During this period of invisible sight, for Xiang Lingling, the days were like years. When dawn finally came, Xiang Lingling could not control her mood. "It still depends on the situation in half a month." Mr. Zhang still didn't give a definite answer, but judging from his expression and tone of voice, he was probably close to the same answer. He sniffed lightly at Lingling and said, "I know. Girl Leun, if you're fine, can you come with me?" Lao Zhang put away the medicine box and looked at Suleun. Suleun turned back and glanced at Lingling. As if he felt Suleun's gaze, he said to Lingling, "Cousin, go ahead." Don't worry about me. Well, if you need anything, just tell the maids. Sulayun replied and left with Mr. Zhang. After leaving Chaeyun Pavilion, Mr. Zhang said, I may have to leave for a while. What happened? Sulayun subconsciously felt that something important had happened. Mr. Zhang was silent for a while. After a while, he spoke, Your master has discovered something strange. I plan to go and take a look with her. Something strange, Sulayun looked puzzled. What kind of strange thing would Mr. Zhang and master want to check? In other words, what kind of strange things can attract Mr. Zhang and master, two people with superb medical skills? Sulayun frowned slightly. Is there any special illness? Sulayun could not think of anything else that would interest Mr. Zhang and master at the same time. Seeing that Sulayun had guessed it, Mr. Zhang didn't hide much. It is indeed a strange disease, but I won't know the specific situation until I go to see it. Shall I ask someone to protect you and master on the way? Lao Zhang did not reject Sulayun's proposal and agreed. Then, he took out a paper full of words from his sleeve and handed it to Sulayun. You have seen these two acupunctures. These are some specific requirements that I have written down. You can take a closer look. If I can't come back in time, it's up to you to perform the acupuncture on Miss Yang. Sulayun did not refuse. Since Yang Lingling's illness had taken effect, of course he should do it all at once and not delay. I see. If anything happens, just ask someone to deliver the letter, it's not that far away. Good. Sulayun nodded. Mr. Zhang met her eyes and said, You still haven't found a cure for your poison. It seems that we can only wait for that woman to appear. Mr. Zhang, you don't have to worry about me. Sulayun reassured her that she had Suwana in her hand and the heart-protecting pills that master had prepared for her, so she wasn't too worried. Lao Zhang also knew that Wang Chen had refined a heart-protecting pill for her, so he dared to leave with peace of mind. That night, Mr. Zhang packed his luggage and left with a few soldiers. On the second day after Mr. Zhang and Wang Chen left, things changed for King An. Wang An's mansion. Early in the morning, the imperial guards rushed in and searched the entire Prince An's mansion. Princess An was not panicked at first, but after noticing the strict actions of the Forbidden Army, she suddenly became panicked out of nowhere. Princess. Magpie noticed the princess's trembling shoulders, worriedly tapped her shoulders, and asked in a low voice. Are you okay? Fine. Princess An stood up. The concubines' courtyards had been checked, and the next step was the sleeping quarters of Prince An and Princess An. Princess An, I'm offended. Feng Hu led the imperial army into Princess An's house. After a search, nothing was found. Subsequently, Feng Hu led his men to search Prince An's residence and study. Princess An stood outside the study, frowning even more as she watched Feng Hu and others digging 3 feet into the ground. Although she and King An were only called husband and wife, she still understood what kind of person King An was. Wang An's temper is indeed violent, and he likes nothing more than to watch people being punished. According to his words, blood makes him tremble, but he also enjoys it. In short, King An is a pervert, and everyone in the capital knows this. But if King An really did something that would be detrimental to Dacian dynasty and Emperor Jianwen, Princess An would not believe a word of it. Suddenly, a crisp cracking sound came. Princess An looked towards the place where the noise came from. A forbidden soldier was taking out a key from the broken vase fragments. Master Feng, I found a key. Is there any place in Prince An's mansion that requires a key to unlock the door? Feng Hu took the lead in looking at Princess An and asked. Princess An shook her head in confusion. How could she know the things that could be hidden by Prince An? What's more, even though she had been married for several years, she hadn't been to Prince An's palace much. Slave, serve seems to know. Behind him, a concubine stood up tremblingly. Princess An's eyes immediately fell on the concubine. She had no impression of this concubine, what do you know? But if she dared to stand up at this time, Princess Anne had to think too much. Feng Hu stepped forward and asked, "Where?" His voice was rough, and the concubine was startled. She shrank her shoulders and whispered, "I don't remember clearly." "Think carefully." Feng Hu lowered his voice with a hint of warning. Concubine couldn't help but look up at Princess Anne. Her lips were pursed tightly, and her little face was very pale. Princess Anne took a deep breath and walked to Feng Hu. "What's your name?" "This slave's name is Zhen'er." "Think about it, where have you seen this key, or, did the prince tell you something?" Faced with Princess Anne's encouragement, Zhen'er finally took a deep breath and said slowly, "I remember that one time when the prince was drunk, he took out this key and showed it to me. At that time, Sister Xinrong was also there." Zhen'er seemed to remember something, turned around and looked behind her. He didn't dare to move when her name was mentioned, so he could only raise half of his face to look. "Look, is this the key?" Feng Hu took the key and handed it to the two of them for observation. Yuer and Xinrong both opened their eyes to see. Then, they looked at each other and nodded to Feng Hu. "It's the key." "What did King An say?" Yuer shook her head, but she thought for a moment and replied, "I left a little later than you were. I heard the prince say something, but I didn't hear it clearly. It seemed that he was talking about the treasure pavilion." Jinbei Pavilion. Feng Hu spent most of his time in the palace and didn't like gold, silver, or jewelry, so he didn't know where the treasure pavilion was. Princess Anne often goes to Jinbei Pavilion and knows the store. After briefly speaking to Feng Hu nodded, "Princess Anne, I'll take people to Jinbei Pavilion first." After saying that, Feng Hu took the people and left. Did not care at all that Prince Anne's mansion was messed up by the imperial army. Princess Anne did not dare to call Feng Hu to stop and ask the imperial guards to clean up, so she had to smile bitterly and let her servants clean up the house briefly. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 383. Chapter 383, Jade Seal is well done. Jinbei Pavilion. Seeing a group of imperial guards standing at the door, the customers who wanted to come in stopped and silently took a few steps back. After making sure that they were not easily heard, a few people gathered together and muttered about what happened in the treasure pavilion. He actually alerted the imperial army. At this time, in Jinbei Pavilion, the shopkeeper lowered his head and stood in front of Feng Hu. "Do you have anything shameful here?" Feng Hu's eyes swept over the shopkeeper and then looked at the objects around him. Even a rough guy like him can see that these things are worth a lot of money. Just placed outside like this, it seems that this treasure pavilion has a profound foundation. Is it possible that it really has something to do with King An? The shopkeeper didn't have much reaction. Although he was a little nervous, he still replied calmly, "I wonder what the shameful thing this gentleman is talking about is. I'm just a shopkeeper. I don't dare to hide anything from you. I hope you will be aware of it. Do you mind if I have someone search your treasure house?" Feng Hu did not directly ask about King An, fearing to alert the enemy. The shopkeeper frowned and hesitated. Under Feng Hu's gaze, the shopkeeper said, "Sir, if you want to search, can you ask the officials to be careful not to destroy the things in the villain's shop? After all, these things were bought by the villain at a big price." "Okay." Feng Hu agreed and gave his men a look. "You boys will have your hands and feet clean in a while. If you bump into something, you have to pay for it yourself." "Yes." The Imperial Guards said in unison. The sound is extremely loud. Subsequently, the Imperial Guards dispersed in all directions and searched the treasure pavilion. With Feng Hu's order, the imperial army's actions were no longer as rough as before in Prince An's mansion, but the degree of carefulness was still the same. Feng Hu casually picked up a jade cup next to him and asked, "The people who can come to your Zhenbao pavilion must be either rich or noble, right?" "Sir, you are joking. A small person is a small businessman. Anyone who comes and goes, as long as he can afford it, is the customer of the small person." "Then there should be a few big customers, right?" Feng Hu was not led astray by the shopkeeper's impeccable words and continued to ask. The shopkeeper frowned and glanced at Feng Hu cautiously. "This, naturally exists." "Who is there?" "Sir, a customer bought something from the villain's shop and caused trouble." It was only now that the shopkeeper finally asked about the matter. Feng Hu brought people in earlier, and the shopkeeper looked panicked, but he quickly calmed the waiter and relaxed a little. "Treat Feng Hu like a guest." Feng Hu glanced at him with a warning in his eyes. "I just need your answer." "Yes, the villain understands." The shopkeeper glanced back and told the clerk, "Go and get the account book quickly." He then said to Feng Hu, "Many things have been recorded in the account books. As for the big patrons that the adults asked about, there must be some. It's just that the little ones don't dare to ask more about the big patrons. Only a few villains know about it. I'm not sure about the others." "Who do you know?" "You know what the villain knows, the young lady of the Lin family, Mr. Li Laohan, the young master of the Zhang family, and His Highness Prince An." When I heard the words His Royal Highness King An, a forbidden soldier ran over with a brocade box in his hand. "My lord, we found a locked box." The brocade box was handed to Feng Hu. The shopkeeper glanced at it and said, "This seems to belong to His Highness Prince An. How come you put King An's things here?" Feng Hu weighed the weight of the brocade box. It was a little heavy. The brocade box was not rectangular, but square. He scanned the lock on the brocade box, matched it with the key, and found that it seemed to match. The shopkeeper thought for a while and replied, "Wang An bought this from us earlier, but he never took it away." "Didn't you take it away? Where did you get this brocade box?" "The villain got it from an acquaintance, but the brocade box was already locked when he got it. The villain didn't want to break the brocade box, so he kept it like this. Later, King An saw it and felt that I bought it out of curiosity." Feng Hu thought thoughtfully, "Has Prince An ever opened it?" "This villain doesn't know. We took this thing away first also. Who is that acquaintance?" The shopkeeper looked embarrassed and said, "Sir, you are really asking the right question. I have never met that acquaintance. There is someone delivering the goods for him, and I don't know who the other person is." Seeing that the shopkeeper really didn't know anything, Feng Hu didn't ask any more questions, and his men didn't find anything special, so he left with the brocade box. As for what was inside the brocade box, Feng Hu did not dare to open it. He only waited until he entered the palace and asked Emperor Jianwen to inspect it in person. Imperial Study Room. Feng Hu handed over the brocade box and key, and then stood aside. Emperor Jianwen took the brocade box and key and looked at them. "Your Majesty, come here, my servant." Eunuch Wan asked in a low voice. "After all, it would not be good if something in this brocade box hurt your Majesty." Emperor Jianwen did not intend to do it himself, so he placed the brocade box and keys on the table again. "Open it." "Yes." Eunuch Wan stepped forward, took the brocade box to him, and then carefully inserted the key. With a click sound, the lock on the brocade box was opened. "The keys are matching." Eunuch Wan's heart was also lifted. He took off the lock and slowly opened the brocade box. The things inside came into view. Feng Hu only saw that Eunuch Wan's face changed drastically, and the aura around Emperor Jianwen also suddenly sank. He knelt down and realized that the contents of the brocade box were not easy to imagine. "You are really my good son. I want to sit in this position while I am still alive." "Your Majesty, calm down." The father-in-law also knelt down. Hearing Emperor Jianwen's words, Feng Hu's breath froze. Could it be that the thing he just glanced at with his peripheral vision was really? Feng Hu, ask people to bring the people from Prince An's palace for interrogation one by one. Prince An, you will do the questioning yourself. I obey the decree. Eunuch Wan's heart trembled. His Majesty has not tortured King An in the past few days. Unexpectedly, he asked Feng Hu to question him directly. It seems that King An will not be easy. Thinking about what he just saw, all the father-in-laws were extremely panicked. How could His Highness King An be so bold? Is this kind of thing something he can just hold? Eunuch Wan lowered his head even lower. Even my most incompetent son, the sixth, covets the position under me. Eunuch Wan, do you think there is such a person among the other princes? Emperor Jianwen spoke coldly. How could Eunuch Wan dare to say anything, but he had to reply to Emperor Jianwen's words. Back to the Emperor, I don't dare to make any unreasonable comments. This jade seal is quite exquisitely made. Look, is it much prettier than this one of mine? Emperor Jianwen took out a brand new jade seal from the brocade box and placed it together with the jade seal on the table. It's shocking. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, Past and Present. Chapter 384. Chapter 384. Candidate for the Crown Prince. Eunuch Wan lowered his head even lower. Not to mention looking at it, even if he was asked to say one more word, he was afraid that His Majesty's anger would spread to him and the head on his neck would be in danger. But as His Majesty's caring person, Eunuch Wan still had to speak. Your Majesty, there may be something else going on in this matter, Eunuch Wan said. He glanced up and saw that Emperor Jianwen had no reaction. Then he continued, I dare to persuade you. Although His Highness Prince An is impatient, but when it comes to filial piety, everyone can see it. You still remember that the year before last, when you said you had no appetite, His Highness Prince An sent people to search around and find a chef to make delicious dishes for you. Now the chef is still serving as the royal cook in the imperial kitchen. Also, on His Majesty's birthday last year, wasn't the gift His Highness Prince An found your favorite? The year before last. As Eunuch Wan was about to continue speaking, Emperor Jianwen waved his hand and stood up. Okay, don't I need you to remember it clearly? Your Majesty. Eunuch Wan got up from the ground and supported Emperor Jianwen. Emperor Jianwen stepped down from the high platform and walked step by step to the door of the imperial study. In the sky, a waning moon hangs high. Dark clouds gradually drifted in, hiding the waning moon. Within a moment, the sky turned gray. Emperor Jianwen looked at the sky in front of him, his eyes deepening, perhaps the time has come. Eunuch Wan was stunned for a moment. He didn't understand what Emperor Jianwen meant. He just felt a little thump in his heart. The situation in Dashan dynasty was probably about to change. The next day. Yesterday, many people in the court knew about Feng Hu's search of Prince An's mansion and Zhenbao pavilion. Therefore, in the early morning of this day, everyone was silent and everyone was in danger. In the palace, Emperor Jianwen sat on the imperial chair. At Emperor Jianwen's signal, Eunuch Wan stepped forward and said, My lords, do you have anything else to report? Other than the good news coming back from the border, no one in the main hall has spoken yet. After waiting for a moment and seeing no one speaking, Wang Gonggong took a step back and stood behind Emperor Jianwen. Since you have nothing to say, I will speak for you. Emperor Jianwen's energetic voice resounded throughout the palace. All the ministers lowered their heads, bowed and saluted, waiting for Emperor Jianwen's instructions. It has been 30 years since I ascended the throne, but I have never established the position of crown prince. Following Emperor Jianwen's words, the hearts of all the ministers were raised. Xiao Jin's eyes showed a hint of desire and expectation, but he quickly concealed it. The other princes could not conceal their excitement. Only Xiao Shenjiao stood at the head of the princes, his face was calm and there was no sign of any disturbance. Emperor Jianwen continued, "Last night, I suddenly felt that it was time to confirm the position of the prince. Long live my emperor!" Everyone said in unison. Obviously, the ministers in the court had the same expectations for the establishment of a prince. Just when everyone thought Emperor Jianwen would name a candidate, Emperor Jianwen said, "I wonder if any of you, my beloved ministers, have any candidates in mind." For a while, there was a lot of discussion in the court. But they were all in small whispers, and they didn't dare to speak loudly. No one knows why Emperor Jianwen asked this question. Emperor Jianwen glanced at everyone. He knew what these people were thinking without asking. "What? None of my sons can be worthy of your attention. Your Majesty, calm down." Upon hearing this, everyone hurriedly spoke. "I have absolutely no intention of doing so." "Then let's talk about it. Who do you think is suitable?" This time, the arrow was on the string and had to be fired. "Ministers, you look at me and I look at you." Finally, someone took the lead to stand up. It is none other than Li Laohanlin. "Your Majesty, I think that when it comes to talent and learning, it belongs to the fourth prince and the seventh prince. Where is the king of Jin?" "I remember, Mr. Li, you said that the talents of the king of Jin are hard to find in the whole country." Emperor Jianwen arrived lightly. The seventh prince, who was originally happy to have his name called out, suddenly turned dark when he heard this. Xiao Jin just squeezed his hand tightly without any change in his expression. Li Laohanlin looked at Xiao Shenjiao. After being discussed like this, he still looked elegant, neither humble nor arrogant. As if the person being mentioned is someone other than yourself. "Your Majesty, the talent of the king of Jin has hurt Zhonyang. No one knows what the third prince was like when he was a child. But since the queen's death, the third prince has become depressed. He also tried to persuade me, but to no avail. Later, when the third prince led the troops to fight, the smell of blood around him became stronger and stronger." Li Laohanlin knew in his heart that such a prince was not suitable to inherit the throne. Even though Xiao Shenjiao looks graceful and graceful now, in Li Laohanlin's eyes, he is nothing but gold and jade. Emperor Jianwen was non-committal. "Lao Li just talked about talent and learning, what about other aspects?" "That's all the veteran can say. As for other aspects, it depends on your colleagues." After saying that, Li Laohanlin retreated to his seat and seriously did not speak again. However, after his opening, several ministers also stood up and expressed their thoughts. Some people mentioned Yu Wang, some mentioned the seventh prince, and even the 13th prince was mentioned. Only Xiao Shenjiao and King An, who is currently in prison, were not mentioned. "General Sun, what do you think?" Sun Shao didn't panic when his name was called by Emperor Jianwen. Normally, military generals do not have to come to the morning court, but early this morning, news came from the palace, asking the generals to attend the court together. As soon as Sun Shao heard the news, he knew that something was going to happen. At first he thought that Emperor Jianwen was going to send people to fight, but after hearing what Emperor Jianwen said, he realized that it was not a war, but the establishment of a prince. Although it was different from what he thought, Sun Shao still seemed calm. He stepped out, cupped his hands and said, "Your Majesty, I am just a reckless man. All I know is marching and fighting. If your Majesty asks me about establishing a prince, I can only say that I have no idea. But if your Majesty asks me, among the princes, who has the best martial arts, there is one person in my heart. General Sun, you might as well say something." In fact, everyone present knew who Sun Shao was going to talk about. Even Emperor Jianwen knew it clearly. Sun Shao opened his mouth and said word by word, "The third prince." As expected. No one can object to this answer. Among the princes, only Xiao Shenjiao has actually been on the battlefield and fought with the enemy. As for the few princes nearby, They also went to the battlefield with the army, but they all sat in the rear and did not go into battle personally. Hearing Sun Xiao's answer, Emperor Jianwen finally showed a smile on his face. Yours martial arts is naturally the best. The expressions of the ministers who had spoken before changed slightly. An idea came to their minds. Maybe Emperor Jianwen had already chosen someone, but they just wanted to let them know. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 385. Chapter 385 is inappropriate. But this candidate is the king of Jin. They don't know how to speak. As for the late queen's affairs, few people inside and outside the court have mentioned it. Even some ministers may not know about it, but many old ministers still know about it. To them, Xiao Shenjiao was really not a suitable candidate for the crown prince. While the ministers were looking at each other, someone stood up. Lu Hong said in a deep voice, "Your Majesty, this matter is of great importance. I think it cannot be decided in just half a day. Your Majesty, please think about it again and again before making a decision." What Mr. Lu said is reasonable, I think so too. Emperor Jianwen followed Lu Hong's words and said, "Since there is still a debate among you, dear ministers, on the matter of opposing the prince, I will not be in a hurry." Emperor Jianwen paused and said, "But there is one more thing that I need to discuss with you all. Please give me your Majesty's instructions." The ministers said in unison. Su Shi's establishment of a crown prince was already too important, so the ministers were not so nervous about what Emperor Jianwen was going to say next. "Bring something up." "Yes." Eunuch Wan's voice contained an imperceptible tremor. Only Lu Hong noticed. His eyes flashed, not knowing what he was thinking. A brocade box was brought to Eunuch Wan. Seeing the brocade box, Feng Hu's expression changed and he lowered his head even lower. "I got a good thing yesterday, and I want to show it to all the ministers." As Emperor Jianwen spoke, he opened the brocade box and took out the contents. The ministers looked up, and then their expressions changed. The timid man only glanced at it and then lowered his head. Emperor Jianwen's bold eyes looked back and forth on his hands several times, and then he lowered his head. What Emperor Jianwen held in his hand was none other than a jade seal. One clean, unused jade seal. "Ministers, have you looked carefully? If not, I will let you take a few more looks." With that said, Eunuch Wan stepped forward and took the jade seal from Emperor Jianwen. Then he walked down with the jade seal in his hand and showed it to the ministers one by one. All the ministers took one look at it and then looked away, not daring to look further. After all the ministers had seen it, Eunuch Wan was not in a hurry to go back. Instead, he turned around and walked towards where the princes were. Except for Xiao Shenjiao and Xiao Jin, the other princes were all heartbroken. "I don't understand what Emperor Jianwen meant." "Your Highnesses, please take a look." Eunuch Wan waved the jade seal in front of several princes before returning to Emperor Jianwen. "You might as well guess where I got this from." Emperor Jianwen raised another difficult question to his ministers. In the court hall, there was complete silence. Compared with the previous time when Emperor Jianwen mentioned the establishment of a prince, he was even quieter. Knowing that he would not hear the answer, Emperor Jianwen did not wait any longer and said, "Master Feng found this thing from the treasure pavilion. Its owner is none other than my good sixth brother, Prince An, Xiao Bian." "Your Majesty, calm down." All the ministers knelt down one after another, and several princes also knelt down. Xiao Shenjiao and Xiao Jin are no exception. A prince holds a jade seal, and the purpose is obvious. The jade seal was casually thrown to the ground by Emperor Jianwen. "Bring Xiao Bian up." Soon, King An, who was all dirty, was carried to the main hall. As soon as the guard released his grip, King An fell softly to the ground. Seeing this scene, all the ministers were trembling in their hearts. But there is also surprise. Would King An do such a thing? But they did not dare to speak. No matter how many explanations there were, the emperor had to be willing to listen. And the current emperor Jianwen probably wouldn't listen to it. As if he was aware of his position, King An, who was lying on the ground, suddenly moved. He reluctantly raised his head, with a few traces of blood on his face, looking very embarrassed. "Father, father, son, is unjustly accused." Wang An's voice was very weak, as if he had been tortured. But in fact, even though His Majesty ordered it, Feng Hu did not dare to use excessive punishment on Prince An. However, for a prince who only knows how to eat, drink and have fun, a slightly heavier punishment may make him. It was as if he had been tortured greatly. Seeing King An like this, Emperor Jianwen seemed to have a hint of unbearability in his eyes. But after seeing the jade seal on the ground with his peripheral vision, the unbearable feeling quickly dissipated. "Lao Lu, I'm not dead yet, do you still want to sit in this position?" Emperor Jianwen said, patting the dragon chair under him. Wang An's dull eyes turned, as if he was listening carefully to Emperor Jianwen's words. After a while, he said, "Father, my son, don't dare." "Then what is this?" "I don't know." When the jade seal was taken into Eunuch Wan's hand and handed to King An. As Emperor Jianwen spoke, King An's eyes also fell on Yuxi. He seemed not to recognize what it was. He looked at it for a long time and whispered, "Father, what is this? Can't you recognize what you prepared yourself?" Emperor Jianwen frowned in boredom. King Kaan still had confusion in his eyes. After staring at the jade seal for a long time, King An's eyes flashed and he finally recognized the object. This is my father's jade seal." He was very confused. Why did his father want to show him the jade seal? Xiao Jin spoke at this moment, "Father, there must be some misunderstanding. How could the sixth brother make the jade seal in private? Make a jade seal privately?" Wang An's eyes almost popped out of their sockets when he heard Xiao Jin's words. Let alone making jade seals, if he were asked to touch the jade seal, he would not dare. "Father!" Wang An's voice suddenly became much louder. He realized that if this matter was not explained clearly, his life might not be saved. "Father, how could my son make jade seals in private? Someone must have framed him." Wang An struggled to get up, trying hard to prove himself. "Yes, father, please be more careful." Xiao Jin spoke, and the other princes also spoke one after another to plead for Prince An. Begging for mercy is not a bad thing anyway. Regardless of whether King An does it or not, they can gain a good reputation as brothers and respectful brothers. Xiao Shenjiao narrowed his eyes and said calmly, "How can father confirm that this thing belongs to the sixth brother?" Emperor Jianwen was not angry at Xiao Shenjiao's question. He pointed at Feng Hu and said, "Master Feng, you answer." "Yes." Feng Hu took a step forward and said, "Back to His Highness Prince Jin, I was ordered to search Prince An's mansion and found the key in a vase in the study. After identification, I learned that this key may be related to the treasure pavilion. The official took people to the Genbeo pavilion and found a brocade box. The key can just open the brocade box." In a few words, Feng Hu explained clearly what happened. Eunuch Wan also brought the opened brocade box and the key. "Sixth brother, do you recognize this brocade box?" Xiao Shenjiao asked. Wang An's eyes passed over the brocade box and then fell on the key. His brows furrowed tightly, wishing that the memory would immediately resurface. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 386. Chapter 386 Turkic Rebellion. The more anxious Su became, the less he could remember. King An's hands on the ground could no longer hold him up. seeing the atmosphere in the hall becoming colder and colder. Wang An finally spoke. "Father, I remembered." Wang An looked at Emperor Jianwen in the high position. "What's in this brocade box is not a jade seal." "Sixth brother, what was originally in that brocade box? It's still locked with a key. Think about it quickly. What kind of valuable thing is it?" Xiao Jin's tone seemed to be worried about Prince An, but it contained an almost invisible urging. Such a sentence makes people suspicious. As Xiao Jin said, if it is not a jade seal, what else can it be? It needed to be locked by King An, and the key was deliberately hidden. Wang An hesitated for a while, but couldn't say anything. "Father, my son swears, there really shouldn't be a jade seal in the brocade box. My son never meant this." Emperor Jianwen seemed to have had enough of the farce. He rubbed his forehead and stood up. Eunuch Wan hurriedly went up and said, "Your Majesty, let them go. I feel uncomfortable hearing this." "Yes." Eunuch Wan helped Emperor Jianwen leave. A young shouted loudly, "Retreat from the court." The ministers did not dare to stay. "You held me and I supported you," and the people in the hall began to disperse. A few princes were left standing in the hall. "Brother Six, are you okay?" The eighth prince stepped forward and hesitantly reached out his hand to pull King An. Among the princes, he had a relatively good relationship with Prince An. Both of them lost their mothers and concubines not long after they were born. But later on, King An's temper became more and more irritable, and the eighth prince and King An did not often get together. "Fine." Before King An could finish speaking, he saw Feng Hu walking up beside him. "Your Highness King An, it's time for us to go back." "Father," Wang An wanted to say that his father had not given an order, but then he thought about it and realized that he had no intention of giving an order, which meant that he had not been cleared yet. Of course he couldn't leave so casually. "I want to see my father again." "Sixth brother, let me take you to find my father to clarify this matter." Xiao Jin opened his mouth. Hearing Xiao Jin's words, King An couldn't help but be moved. "Fourth brother, it's better that you treat me well. What was originally put in the brocade box?" Xiao Shenjia walked to King An. His voice was quite cold. Wang An's face froze. I don't remember." "Then how do you prove that the jade seal inside is not a jade seal?" Wang An was speechless. He couldn't tell what was originally in the brocade box, but if he didn't tell it, it wouldn't be impossible to prove his innocence. "Third brother, you can't say that. The most important thing now is to get the sixth brother out of prison first. You don't want to see the sixth brother suffer in prison, right?" Seeing that King An had a different look on his face, Xiao Jin's eyes flickered and he said, "Have you ever said that your father would put your sixth brother in prison?" After Xiao Shenjia finished speaking, he looked at Feng Hu. "Master Feng, are you going to send your sixth brother back to Prince An's mansion?" Feng Hu was stunned for a moment. Eunuch Wan had indeed told him this before going to court in the morning. It must have been His Majesty's intention. But His Highness King Jin actually saw it? No wonder he is so calm. Exactly. Feng Hu's answer made Xiao Jin's face turn pale. Wang An was immediately overjoyed. "Father, don't you blame me. Your Majesty, King An, your Majesty wishes you to stay in the palace." Feng Hu explained after careful consideration. "It is also a disguised form of imprisonment." But King An didn't care too much. It was good to be able to leave the dark prison. "Then take me back quickly." Knowing that there was no need to go back to Tianlao, King An looked much better. Two imperial soldiers helped King An up and carried him out. In the palace, Xiao Jin twitched his lips and said, "It seems that I made a mistake." He calmed down and left with King An. The other princes saw that nothing happened and left. Xiao Shenjia was the last person to walk out of the hall. "His Royal Highness the King of Jin." Han Qingyuan lowered his head and called out to Xiao Shenjia. "Concubine Min invites you." Xiao Shenjiao's eyes flickered from Han Qingyuan. It is inconvenient for me to go. Looking at Xiao Shenjiao's leaving figure, Han Qingyuan stood for a moment before walking away. Zhaochun Palace. As soon as Han Qingyuan returned to the palace, a young came running over. Eunuch Han, the Empress is looking for you. Nu. Han Qingyuan responded softly and walked to concubine Min's bedroom. As soon as he entered the house, Han Qingyuan smelled the fragrance of flowers all over the house. He glanced at the flowers placed in the room. There were many varieties of flowers of various colors, decorating concubine Min's palace like a flower room. Concubine Min was lying on the imperial concubine's chair. A palace maid was responsible for beating her shoulders, and a palace maid was responsible for pressing her legs. There were also palace maids who peeled off the skin of lychees for concubine Min, and then fed them into concubine Min's mouth. The maid standing behind concubine Min saw Han Qingyuan and whispered, "Mother, Eunuch Han is back." Oh, concubine Min opened her eyes and looked behind Han Qingyuan. She didn't see the person she wanted to see. Where is Prince Jin? Han Qingyuan knelt down and said, His Royal Highness King Jin said that it is not convenient for him to come. Facing concubine Min, Han Qingyuan acted like a eunuch. Having low self-esteem and trying to please. It's not convenient to come. Concubine Min frowned. She didn't understand what she meant. Forget it, then you can go for me and ask Princess Anil to come. Han Qingyuan was slightly startled, and then lowered his head. Your Majesty, Princess Anil's residence is outside the palace, I'm afraid. A palace card hid Han Qingyuan behind him. The maid who threw out the palace card said, This is the token for entering and exiting the palace. Eunuch Han should go early and come back early. Don't lose it. The slave obeys the order. Han Qingyuan took the palace card, stood up, still hanging his head, and slowly walked out of concubine Min's bedroom. It's just that today will not pass so easily after all. At 3/4 to noon, a piece of news came back to the capital. Yu Hualin Khan died suddenly. This news not only caused chaos in the Turks, but also caused quite a storm in the capital. Sulayun was calmer than others when he heard the news, but he was also a little surprised. She originally thought that the last time Yu Hualin Khan did not die, he had passed this catastrophe, but she did not expect that it would be at this time. Then what happens next will be the same as in the last life. A few days later, the eldest prince succeeded to the throne and sent someone to conclude a treaty of friendship. The situation is a little different from the previous life, but the same goal is achieved through different paths. Ashinaju succeeded to the throne, but no news came from Ashinayang. I don't know whether I am alive or dead. The treaty of friendship was delivered to Emperor Jianwen. The ministers gathered in the imperial study room to discuss the matter. I think that the Turks' conclusion of this treaty is somewhat sudden, and I hope that your Majesty will think twice before doing so. I feel that the Turks' attitude is extremely sincere. Our country has been having friction with the Turks for nearly 100 years. It would be a pleasure if it could end now. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 387. Chapter 387 Continuous Nightmares. The ministers discussed it a lot, some supported it and some opposed it. Okay, I came to you not for discussion. Emperor Jianwen interrupted everyone's discussion. I have already come to a conclusion in my heart, but I need someone to go to the northwest. At this point, the ministers stopped. Going to the northwest? One of the ministers hesitated to speak and asked, I wonder if your Majesty wants to agree or reject. After fighting for so many years, it's a good thing to be able to stop here. The meaning of Emperor Jianwen's words is very clear. He intends to agree to diplomatic relations. In this case, who to send is also a big problem. This person must at least be worthy of Emperor Jianwen's face. Why don't you go with King Yu? His Royal Highness King Yu is a good candidate, and I second my proposal. I think it's okay too. These days, in addition to the Turkic affairs, the matter of establishing a prince is also bothering the ministers. Among them, the ministers who sided with King Yu have begun to show up and wrote letters to support King Yu. The other princes also have the support of ministers, but in comparison, King Yu's reputation is obviously better than the other princes. Emperor Jianwen remained silent until the ministers calmed down, then he said, "Then let the fourth child be the envoy and the third child the deputy envoy, and go to the northwest." The ministers were stunned. "Why is there another His Highness, Prince Jin? It seems that no one mentioned King Jin just now." Emperor Jianwen would not give them any explanation. He waved his hand and let the ministers leave. When they left the imperial study, the ministers were still in a daze. Those with sharp eyes saw Eunuch Wan standing outside the imperial study room and immediately stepped forward. "Eunuch Wan, so you are here. No wonder I didn't see you in the imperial study room just now." "You're welcome, sir." Grandpa Wan is smiling. He naturally has a purpose in standing outside. Fortunately, the minister in front of him did not disappoint him. "Eunuch Wan, I wonder why your majesty asked King Jin and King Yu to go to the northwest together." The ministers who had noticed the movement here long ago stopped. Eunuch Wan cleared his throat, attracted the attention of several ministers, and then said, "The letter sent by the Turks addressed His Highness the King of Jin by name. This means, in other words, the Turks have already decided on the candidate, so why does your majesty need to ask them again?" When the matter of establishing the crown prince was discussed again, the ministers took a breath of air. "So, is your majesty's candidate for the crown prince really His Royal Highness the King of Jin?" Several old ministers looked at each other with a wry smile on their lips. If His Majesty really wanted to establish His Royal Highness as King Jin, they might not be able to stop him. But now that I think about it, His Majesty has not mentioned the matter of establishing a crown prince for so many years, maybe just to wait for this day. Xiao Jin was naturally happy when the news of his mission to the northwest came down. It would only be a good thing for him to be able to go to the northwest as an envoy and establish diplomatic relations with the Turks. "What did you say?" When he heard the second half of the sentence, Xiao Jin's expression changed. "His Royal Highness the King of Jin, as deputy envoy, will go to the northwest with you." "I understand, you go down first." Xiao Jin calmed down and waited until everyone left, then revealed his fierce gaze and threw the teacup in front of him to the ground. "It's Xiao Shenjiao again." He sat down and murmured to himself, "Father, do you really like Xiao Shenjiao so much? It is no small matter for two princes to go to the northwest together." "Don't want." Sulayun woke up from a nightmare. She could vaguely see the skylight outside the window. She was breathing heavily, but she couldn't remember the scene in her dream. Lian Xian opened the curtain and came in. "Miss, are you having nightmares again? Would you like the kitchen to prepare a bowl of soothing soup for you?" Since the news of Yu Hualin Khan's accident came out, the young lady has started to have nightmares. "This is the fourth time I have been awakened." "Fine." Sulayun took the water from Lian Xian and drank it in one gulp. This feeling is rare. In her previous life, she rarely had nightmares, but after her mother died, she often dreamed of her grandfather and brother. But she could still remember those scenes after she woke up. After her rebirth, most of the dreams she had were about things from her previous life. It was rare for her to have nightmares, and the strangest thing was that she couldn't remember anything after waking up. After drinking water, Sulayun felt much better. "What time is it now?" "It's almost time." Lian Xian put the teacup on the small table aside. "Miss, please rest for a while." Sulayun nodded, but after lying down, he couldn't fall asleep. "I can only keep my eyes open and wait until it gets bright." She is going to give Lingling an acupuncture today. It has been several days since Master and Mr. Zhang left. Has Mr. Zhang sent someone to send a message back? Sulayun looked at the bronze mirror and suddenly thought of this. A few days ago, there was news, but these days there is no news. Lian Xian shook her head, Miss, not really. If there is no news today, let Sun Wen go and have a look. My slave has written it down. After finishing dressing up, Sulayun got up and headed to Chaeyun Pavilion. As soon as he arrived at the yard, he saw Mrs. Yang walking out of the yard dressed neatly. Grandma, where are you going? Do I need to tell you, a junior, where I am going? Mrs. Yang's face looked unnatural for a moment, as if she didn't expect to meet Sulayun by such a chance. Of course, Sulayun was not interested in caring about what the old lady wanted to do. Of course not, Grandma can go out if she wants. Snored. He hummed to the old lady and walked past Sulayun. Looking at the back of Mrs. Yang, Sulayun frowned slightly and said, Quilayu, follow me and take a look. Be careful. Yes, miss. Quilayu nodded in agreement and quickly followed in the footsteps of the old lady Xiang. In the house. Xiang Lingling has been waiting for Sulayun for a long time. Cousin. Well, Mr. Zhang hasn't come back yet, so I can only give you the acupuncture, don't worry. I'm not worried, I believe in you, cousin. She nodded firmly to Lingling, she really believed in Sulayun. Sulayun took out the silver needle, recalled Mr. Zhang's actions, and then used the needle to apply the needle to Lingling. After a set of acupuncture techniques, there was nothing wrong. After taking off the silver needle, Xiang Lingling didn't show any uncomfortable expression. How does it feel? Sulayun asked as he put away the silver needle. Xiang Lingling felt it for a while and replied, it seems to be about the same as last time, but after taking medicine these past few days, I always feel that my head feels much better than before. Is it because the congestion in my brain has dispersed? I'll take a look for you. Sulayun took Xiang Lingling's hand and checked her pulse. After a while, she let go of her hand and said, look at the pulse, the blood clots should be spreading. How do your eyes feel? End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 388. Chapter 388. Go to Su's house again. Xiang Lingling subconsciously touched her eyes. When she touched the black cloth covering her eyes, her hand stopped again. It seems to be almost the same as last time. She didn't feel the obvious feeling of light coming in last time. This time, she didn't feel it. But it is not without effect. He said to Lingling, the light I can see is getting brighter and brighter recently. Maybe I will be able to see it soon. Hearing what Xiang Lingling said, Sulayun breathed a sigh of relief. That's good. According to Mr. Zhang's wishes, Sulayun modified the prescription and asked Xiang Lingling to continue drinking it. After handling Xiang Lingling's affairs, Sulayun hurried to Suye's yard. When he arrived, Suye was neatly dressed and walked out with King Guiyue. Elder brother. Sulayun was half a step behind and shouted. Suye turned around and saw Sulayun panting. He stepped forward and said, why are you in such a hurry? I'm just afraid of being slow and not being able to make it in time. Sulayun calmed down and then continued, brother, are you going to the palace? Well, what's wrong, what do you want me to do? There is indeed something going on. Sulayun took something out of his arms. It was wrapped in cloth, but he couldn't tell what was inside. Brother, I would like to trouble you to give this thing to a man named Wei Yat. Wei Yat, when did you know him? Suye was a little confused. Why didn't he know that Yunar was connected with Wei Yat? Could it be that there is something going on in private? Brother, don't make blind guesses, this kind of thing is for concubine Qin. Sulayun handed the thing to Suye, interrupting his speculation. Suye put away the things wrapped in cloth, is there nothing else? No, you go quickly, don't waste the time. Suye waved to Suleun and left with King Guyu. After returning to Kayahuaziazu, Quilayu came back within an hour. Miss, Mrs. Siang went to see Mrs. Su again. Quilayu followed old Madame Siang secretly, and saw that old Madame Siang went directly to Su's house. The most she could do was go to the courtyard gate, and there was no way to go in. After waiting for a long time, old Madame Siang came out. After following Mrs. Siang back, Quilayu immediately ran to report. Looking at Quilayu panting, Suleun motioned to Lian Xian to pour her a glass of water. After drinking a glass of water, Quilayu said, "Miss, what do you want Mrs. Siang and Mrs. Su to do?" "Have no idea." Suleun shook his head. "Mrs. Siang has come back." "Well, people are already at Chaeyun Pavilion. I waited a little longer and saw that the old lady didn't go out again, so she came back." Quilayu nodded. She was worried about where she would go as soon as she left Mrs. Siang, so she waited for a while. Suleun smiled and said, "In that case, let's go and ask directly." Quilayu was stunned and glanced at Lian Xian. She didn't understand what Suleun meant. When they saw Suleun getting up and walking out, Quilayu and Lian Xian reacted and hurriedly followed. Mrs. Siang is sitting in the room, letting her maid massage her shoulders and legs. She looks very comfortable. Hearing that Suleun was coming, she was not in a hurry and stood up slowly. "Grandma, are you back from the Su family?" Suleun got straight to the point and asked directly. Siang was stunned for a moment, then frowned. "You sent someone to follow me?" Suleun did not hide it either, which made Mrs. Siang even more confused. "Who told you to send someone to follow me?" "Grandma, what are you doing at Su's house?" Suleun asked without replying to the old lady's words. Mrs. Siang was angered by Suleun's attitude. "Is this your attitude when talking to elders?" "Grandma, why don't we just be direct?" Suleun suppressed a smile. "You can still stay in the capital, but you don't want to take advantage of the Su family. Or, tomorrow, I will tell my grandfather, and you said you are not used to living there, can I take you back?" "You're sending me back, then you can't cure Lingling's illness." Mrs. Siang knew this. If it weren't for the diagnosis and treatment of Siang Lingling's illness, the Sun family would have sent her back to Yunchinj long ago. It is precisely because of this that Mrs. Siang behaves so unabashedly. Suleun's expression remained unchanged, and he looked very relaxed as he sat in his seat. She did not speak, but it made Mrs. Siang feel a little restless. But soon, he said to the old lady again, "Suleun, Lingling's illness has nothing to do with you. If you really drive us away, I will avenge Lingling." "Grandma, what are you talking about?" Siang Lingling put her hand on the doorframe. She heard a noise from Mrs. Siang's house and wanted to come over to see what was going on. Just before entering the house, I heard Mrs. Siang say this. This made her unable to control herself for a moment and spoke for Suleun. "My illness has nothing to do with my cousin." The maid helped Siang Lingling walk in and brought her to Suleun's side. "Cousin, if my grandmother does anything, please send me and my grandmother back to Yunchinj." Siang Lingling knew that she could not stop her grandmother, but she could choose to make her grandmother unable to do anything. Facing the granddaughter with her elbows turned outward, Siang Madam became even more angry. But she calmed down. "I heard, Lingling, that your eyes have improved." Siang Lingling did not answer. She was afraid that what she said would break her hard-earned determination. Mrs. Siang walked up to Siang Lingling, took her hand, and said with a kind face, "Lingling, you don't want to be unable to see in the future, do you? You must heal your eyes first." "Grandma, if you really want me to cure my eyes, please stop doing unnecessary things, okay?" Siang Lingling raised her head. Although her eyes were covered with black cloth, her face was facing Mrs. Siang. This gave Mrs. Siang a strange feeling, as if Xiang Lingling in front of her was not blind. She frowned. Lingling, don't you even understand Grandma? Grandma just went out for a walk and didn't do anything. Grandma, do you dare to swear? What did you say? As soon as Mrs. Yang heard what Xiang Lingling said, she immediately let go of her hand, and her expression suddenly turned ugly. Sulayun also had enough of seeing Mrs. Yang's change of expression. He stood up and said, Grandma, you are not feeling well. Please stay at home for the next few days and don't go out randomly. What's wrong? Before Mrs. Yang could finish her words, she saw Sulayun leading Xiang Lingling out. Just as she was about to follow, several nuns came out from both sides and blocked her way. To the old lady, please go back and have a good rest. Only then did Mrs. Yang realize that Sulayun wanted to imprison her in disguise. Sulayun, come back here. But no matter how she yelled or acted, no one came forward to help her. Even the maids and mothers around old Madame Xiang have been replaced, and they are looking after old Madame Xiang in full compliance with Sulayun's requirements. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 389. Chapter 389 Caught Granny Lan. After learning that Suye was going to the two princes to the northwest, Sulayun subconsciously thought of his nightmare that he couldn't remember. She didn't know what happened in the dream, but her intuition told her that the nightmares she had in those days were all the same. Moreover, maybe it has something to do with my brother. Brother, do you have to go? Sulayun asked with worry in Jiawan. Sun Gro was not willing to let her son leave. She also looked at Suye and said, yes, isn't there someone else? Why did I let you go? Mom, this is not the same thing. Suye had no choice but to explain to his mother, I also contributed to the battle with the Turks. The emperor meant that if I go together, I can also prevent the Turks from attacking. What if the Turks really attack? Sun Gro frowned. She didn't have any nightmares like Sulayun, it was just a mother's worry about her child going out. Especially going to places like the Northwest. Mom, our soldiers are not vegetarians, and as long as the two countries can establish dialogue, my second uncle can come back. Suye glanced at Sulayun and asked her to help him persuade Sun Gro. Sulayun didn't know what he was thinking. It took him a while to come back to his senses and said, Mom, it's okay. This sentence was also said absent-mindedly. After leaving Jiawan, Suye looked at his sister walking beside him and bumped her gently with his elbow. What are you thinking about? Brother, do you think the Turks really want to make peace? Sulayun will never forget that his grandfather and brother died in the northwest. In the previous life, Khan Yuhualan died suddenly. Ashinaju and Ashina Yang fought for the position of Khan for a long time, but Ashinaju finally won. After becoming Khan, Ashinaju did not rush to send troops to attack the northwest border. Instead, he ordered the Turkic soldiers to retreat and recuperate. After a year, the Turks completed their adjustments before sending troops to attack the northwest border. It was during this battle that my brother lost his whereabouts, and my grandfather was forced to rush to the battlefield. Eventually, he and his two uncles died in the northwest. Sulayun's face turned a little pale when he thought of this. Yunur, why do you look so ugly all of a sudden? Are you feeling uncomfortable somewhere? Suye looked at Sulayun's cheek worriedly, then stretched out his hand to rest on her forehead. There is no fever. Sulayun took Suye's wrist and said, Brother, I'm asking you something. If I say that the Turks really want to make peace, do you believe it? Sulayun met Suye's eyes and said after a while, I believe what my brother said. That would be great. Suye patted his sister on the head and said, don't stay at home all the time. Go out for a walk more often. This way you won't think too much. I'm not just imagining things. Sulayun muttered, these all really happened in the last life. But will it be different in this life? Well, I happen to be free today, so we, brother and sister, can go out and have a nice walk. Suya took Sulayun's hand, and the brother and sister walked out. Suya did what he said. He really played with Sulayun all day long, and didn't return to Sun Mansion until night. As soon as he entered the house, the person who was looking after Suwainer ran over. Miss, the people in that room want to see you. See me? Sulayun was a little surprised. Mr. Zhang was not here, and she didn't take care of Suwainer. Fortunately, Suwainer was also sensible. Although she could speak, she didn't shout at the top of her voice, so she was very calm. Hence, Sulayun could not imagine for a moment that Suwainer had anything to say to him. She thought about it, but didn't rush back to the house. She turned around and went to the small dark room where Suwainer was locked up. Sulayun pushed open the door and walked in. Lotus Heart and Green Willow lit the candles. The house became bright. Sulayun, what do you want from me? Sulayun stood in a place where Suwainer could see, lowering his head and looking at her. Suwainer weakly twitched her lips. You're really here? Sulayun remained silent. Suwainer, on the other hand, couldn't help it anymore. Aren't you curious why I want to find you? Why should I be curious? Or do you think Granny Lan can rescue you? Sulayun suddenly laughed. At this time, there was a noise outside the house. Suwainer's eyes widened. How is that possible? She seemed very surprised. Catch her, don't let her get away. With such a vague sentence coming, Lian Xian pulled up a chair and asked Sulayun to sit down. Gradually, the sounds outside became quieter. After a while, Sun Wen brought Granny Lan in. Want to take a look? Although Sulayun was asking a question, he still motioned Quiliu to help Suwainer up so that she could see what Granny Lan looked like at this time. Grandma Lan, who has always liked to be clean and tidy, now had dirt on her face and body. Especially the drooped arms, it was obvious that the arms had been removed. Sulayun, how could you? Suwainer's lips trembled, and she realized that all the previous events were arranged by Sulayun. Let her speak and let her relax her vigilance, all in order to catch Granny Lan. Sulayun shook his head. I asked you to speak because I feel that you have been silent. Every time I come to see you, it always feels too quiet. I don't like it. The capture of Granny Lan was indeed within Sulayun's arrangement, but she did not expect that Granny Lan could not wait any longer and jumped out in such a hurry. And Sulayun narrowed his eyes slightly. Realize something is wrong. Suddenly, pain spread from Sulayun's heart. She clung to the handle of the chair with one hand, and veins appeared on the back of her hand. Miss Lian Xian panicked immediately. Sulayun took a few deep breaths. This kind of pain was better than when Suwainer used the bracelet to control the goo insects. She looked at Granny Lan and saw Granny Ian's smile that hadn't dissipated yet. She recalled the scene when she was put into the goo worm that day. The mother worm is on you. Sulayun will definitely arrive. Grandma Lan is not afraid that she will know, the female insect is in my body. Whatever you do to me, you will get the same pain. This is the power of Zima goo. You're not going to hurt yourself, are you? After a long time, Sulayun slowly spoke. Grandma Ian's eyes narrowed severely, but she did not answer Sulayun's question. But her reaction already gave Sulayun the answer. In this case, let you stay with Suwainer. Sulayun recovered from the pain. Grandma Lan was good at martial arts, but she couldn't be given medicine, so Sulayun had to be closely guarded and put shackles and handcuffs on Granny Lan. As for why they should be locked together, Sulayun had some ideas. She hopes to get Suwainer's identity from the conversation between the two people. Grandma Lan may not say it, but Suwainer will definitely ask. In the small dark room, only Suwainer and the detained Granny Lan were left. The flame of the candle lit up the room, making it seem very quiet. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter returns, the real daughter is reborn. Author, past and present. Chapter 390. Chapter 390 Asking for someone at your door. Just as Sulayun thought, Suwaner couldn't hold it any longer. Not long after. Grandma Lan, why did you come to Sue's house in the first place? Even though Granny Lan risked her life to save her, Suwainer's vigilance towards Granny Lan did not diminish. She did not ask directly, but in a roundabout way. Mother Lan has been serving Suwainer for so many years, and she has long known Suwainer's temperament. She did not answer. Grandma Lan. Suwainer couldn't move and couldn't see Granny Ian's condition. She thought she didn't hear her and subconsciously raised her voice. I'm asking you something. Miss Wanner, you don't need to ask anymore. Why can't I ask? Can't I even know who I am? As soon as Suwainer heard what Granny Lan said, she felt angry for some reason. What does this mean? She once laughed at Sulayun, but she didn't expect that now she would become a person whose life experience is unknown. This reversal made Suwainer feel even more uncomfortable. She closed her eyes, trying to suppress this feeling. But to no avail. You won't tell me if I die. Suwainer's voice was a bit sad. Granny Lan said, Miss Wanner, nothing will happen to you. We were all captured by Sulayun. Tell me, can we escape? Suwainer laughed angrily. She even felt that Granny Lan came to save her. Could it be that she wanted to die with her? But after waiting for a long time, there was no response from Granny Lan. Suwainer didn't bother to waste any more words. She seemed to be used to being locked up. She closed her eyes and rested by herself. What she didn't expect was that Granny Ian's words would come true very quickly. Lu Hong and Su Changqing led people into Sun's house. As soon as he opened his mouth, he asked Sulayun to hand over Suwainer. Sulayun glanced at old Madame Xiang not far away, and sneered in his heart. This old woman is quite smart. But what exactly are you drawing? What do you mean, Mr. Lu? Sun Shao stared at Lu Hong with cold eyes and protected his granddaughter behind him. Su Changqing huddled behind Lu Hong and said in a pretentious manner, Old General Sun, Wanner is still a child of my Su family, but Sulayun actually imprisoned her in the house. If she treats her sister like this, her character must have been broken a long time ago. Snort. Sun Changping saw Su Changqing's behavior and snorted coldly. Su Changqing turned pale with fright, but thinking that Lu Hong was here, it was not a lie that Suwainer was being imprisoned. He is confident again. Either you hand him over today, or we go. Then go ahead. Sun Gro suddenly spoke up. She didn't know whether Suwainer was in the Sun mansion or not, but even if Su Changqing barged in like this, she would still stand on her daughter's side. Su Changqing, you'd better break this matter out so that everyone in the capital knows that your Su family has raised someone else's daughter. You. Su Changqing didn't know how to answer for a while. He really wanted to bring the matter to the government just now, but if it was revealed that Suwainer was not his daughter, wouldn't it make the Su family a joke again? Thinking about it, Su Changqing looked at Lu Hong subconsciously. Faced with his wife, a somewhat stupid brother, Lu Hong had no expression on his face. He had made such preparations before coming. Suwainer is the young lady of the Li family. When you detain her, aren't you afraid that the Li family will make trouble? Sulayun raised her eyebrows and looked at Lu Hong. She didn't believe that he hadn't checked at Li's house before he came. If checked, Lu Hong's ability would be impossible not to guess that Suwainer being detained by her has something to do with the Li family. But she didn't believe it, and Lu Hong wouldn't investigate. So, this statement may have a deeper meaning. Or do you and the Li family have other purposes? Lu Hong's tone was calm, but the words he spoke made people frightened for a moment. Sun Shao narrowed his eyes and stared at the junior in front of him. The eyebrows and eyes are very similar to those of my friends, but the feelings are very different. Although my friend is called the smiling military advisor, he is extremely kind and approachable by nature. Even though Lu Hong always has a cold face, he gives people the impression that he is not cold, but cold. Master Lu is joking. Suleun glanced at Lu Hong. Mrs. Li is only staying in our house for a few days. Lu Hong frowned and quickly relaxed. He turned around and looked at Su Weiner, who was being helped by the maids. Doubts arose in my heart. Did Suleun let him go so easily? Mrs. Li has been here for a long time, so it's time to go back. Suleun did not stop her and allowed the people brought by Lu Hong to take Su Weiner over. Lu Hong stared at Suleun for a while, then looked away and said to Sun Shao in a deep voice, "Old General Sun, I'm sorry for disturbing you today. Then we'll leave first." After the people left, Sun Shao looked at his granddaughter. "Yuner, are you just going to let me go like this?" "It's okay, Grandpa, not to mention there is Granny Lan here." Suleun certainly didn't send Granny Lan away, and judging from Lu Hong's posture, he didn't seem to care about Granny Lan. The mother worm is in Granny Lan. In fact, Granny Lan is far more important to her than Su Weiner. What's more, she also did something to Su Weiner. Sun Gro pulled Suleun over and said, "Yuner, when did you catch Su Weiner?" She didn't even know at all. And looking at her father's expression, it was obvious that she was the only one among several people who was kept in the dark. "Mom, Yuner was worried that you would think too much, so she didn't tell you." Suleun took Sun Gro on his arm and explained while walking towards Jiawen. Sun Gro already knew her daughter's temperament very well. "You all know it, so why don't you let me know?" Although she said complaining words, her tone was very calm. Not really complaining about Suleun's concealment. Suleun grinned and smiled a little naively. "Then why did you let him go again? Even if Lu Hong dares to complain to the emperor, we will be justified. Wouldn't it be better to have one less trouble? Anyway, there's nothing else I need to know about Su Weiner. It's not that he let the person go so easily, but Su Weiner's body has been poisoned. Even if she really left, Suleun could still control her. The poison was prepared by her master and Mr. Zhang together. I am afraid that there is no one in the whole capital that can detoxify it." "What about the poison on your body?" Sun Gro is most worried about Suleun's health, especially since her daughter now has a worm on her body. She is even more worried. She had nightmares almost every night in the days after she first learned about it. "The dream was the scene of my daughter's tragic death. What's a little strange is that the way her daughter died didn't seem to be caused by a poisonous insect." Suleun said, "Grandma Lan has been caught. When Mr. Zhang comes back, maybe we can come up with a solution." End of this chapter.